Thank you to all of you who have already joined us. I'll just give it another few minutes in case there's a few of you who are still having trouble logging on. So feel free to sit back and relax, and I'll let you know when we get started. Okay, we'll get started now. Thank you so much for coming along to today's Security Studies, Intelligence and Cybersecurity webinar. My name is Jacqueline and I'm a current just finished my third year student at Macquarie University doing a double degree of Law and Security Studies. In today's session, we will explore Macquarie's postgraduate courses in the exciting and complex areas of Security Studies, Intelligence and Cybersecurity. You'll get to hear from one of Macquarie's senior lecturers, as well as a recently graduated student currently working in a US-based tech company. However, before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. We pay our respect to them and their culture and elders past, present, and future. In today's webinar, I will be first introducing Dr. Julian Drewgen, who is a senior lecturer in security studies within Macquarie's Department of Security Studies and Criminology. He will be providing a quick overview of the postgraduate degrees we offer for security studies, intelligence and cybersecurity. After that, I will be introducing Chris Chang, who will share his own personal study journey and experiences at Macquarie with us today. And then towards the end of the webinar, we will then have time for a Q&A session with Dr. Julian Droogan, who's going to be answering your questions live. I also do have a few quick housekeeping points to ensure that you all get the most out of today's webinar. Firstly, if you have any questions throughout it, please feel free to put those questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Those questions will either be answered live or via the chat box for you. Secondly, the session is being recorded, so if there's anything that you miss out on, you can actually watch that later. We'll be providing a copy of that for you, so there's no need to worry about that. And lastly, if we do run out of time and any of your questions aren't answered properly, you can actually book a one-on-one personal consultation with us, and we'll be providing you with information on how to go about that. I hope all that made sense. Sorry, it's a lot of information. Feel free to pop a question in the Q&A box if you do need anything clarified. Up first, I would like to introduce Dr. Julian Drewgen to talk to us about Macquarie's postgraduate courses.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and it's very good to see you all, or not see you yet, but to be here in contact with you all wherever you might be around Australia or indeed around the world. I'm an academic working in terrorism studies primarily as part of the Security Studies and Criminology Department here at Macquarie University. So I'll tell you a little bit about the postgraduate programs that we offer to industry around Australia. And I'll also talk a little bit about what makes our programs different and in particular unique in Australia. If you have any questions, please jot them down as I'm speaking and enter them into the chat function. You can ask us any questions that you might have, and at the end of the seminar, I'll do my absolute best to answer them for you. So our security studies program is the largest and also the most comprehensive offered in Australia. It's very multidisciplinary, which means that it looks at all of the issues that affect global security around the world, but also impact Australia domestically. And it looks at all those issues from a series of different perspectives. Perspectives of the state, perspectives of government, perspective of individuals, human security, and so on. We try very hard to strike a balance between the domains of theory and also the domains of practice. We try to blend them as much as possible to really try to acknowledge that security challenges that we all face, they don't respect differences between theory and practice, nor do security challenges respect differences in discipline. If we're going to address them, then we're going to need to do so holistically, which is very much the sort of perspective that we focus on in our security studies program here at Macquarie University. And that's quite well reflected in the makeup of our staff. We are all academics, we all do research in these areas. We also consult for government and for other organisations. But also many of our staff members have come out of these sorts of professions in the past. So they may have had experience working for defence or for intelligence or for police or for DFAT or whatever it might be. And they bring those real world experiences to our programs and to the sorts of solutions that we try to create to deal with international security problems. Everything from environmental issues through to state versus state conflict, through to terrorism, through to organised crime, through to cyber security. And all of this is designed to create an environment where we can collectively work on solutions to international security and create graduates who are able to use those skills to either advance in their careers they already have or to get into working in the field in these areas. And so we focus on employability, in particular in the domains of government, the public sector. Many of our students will end up working in the public sector, either through graduate programs or for various agencies or departments, either at the federal level or at the state level. We also have many graduates that work in the private sector. Private sector obviously has a huge role to play in dealing with security issues. It also faces its own security issues, particularly in cybersecurity. And we have graduates also that work in the NGO sector, either in Australia or around the world. And our programs, I think, reflect that diversity as well. So you can see on the screen, there's at the bottom a series of different master's programs that we offer. They move from the Masters of Security and Strategic Studies, which focuses on defence, conflict between states, issues that affect our part of the world, the rise of new powers like China and India in the Indo-Pacific, how states respond to the challenges that these sorts of economic and political and military rises engender, and also how international security is mediated by states as well. We also have the Masters of Intelligence, one of our most popular master's programs for quite some time. This is really a master's that focuses on really trying to educate people and train people in understanding how intelligence works. And so people come to that often thinking about things like spying or CIA type intelligence projects and stuff like that. That's certainly a component of intelligence, but it deals with so much more than just what you might see on Hollywood. It deals with analysis, intelligence analysis, with working with big data, with large amounts of electronic intelligence. And this is a function that you'll find not just in government, certainly not just in national security or international relations, but also amongst all medium-sized to large private sector organizations as well. Banks, airlines, consultancy firms, large multinationals all have intelligence functions that they work on when they do their business. We also have the Master of Cybersecurity Analysis. That's part of a larger series of cybersecurity opportunities that are here at Macquarie University. We do a lot of work through our cybersecurity hub with the private sector and also with government. We've done a lot of training for DFAT with some of our partners in the region in terms of cybersecurity capabilities. We've also worked closely with Optus and some other large private sector organisations in upskilling their personnel and also creating graduates who are able to respond to cybersecurity challenges in Australia. That particular cybersecurity degree is designed not to be focused on coding or computer programming. You can do that at Macquarie University. This one is more about strategic level cybersecurity and how to deal with risk, how to strategize around risk in the context of the increasing and ever-growing cybersecurity threats that we're all facing all the time. We also have a Masters of Criminology, which focuses on applied criminology as well as theoretical criminology. So a lot of work there around how we talk about crime, how crime and punishment works in our societies, but there's also more practical work there around judicial systems, corrections, forensics, and so on in the criminology space. And lastly, we have the program that I look after, which is Counter-Terrorism. It's an area that I do a lot of work in, and it looks at dealing with that issue of terrorism, but also violent extremism in Australia, but around the world, and looks at everything from countering groups like Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, all the way through to countering violent extremism programs, dealing with far-right extremism, issues-based forms of extremism, threats to social cohesion, and some of these really big issues in the 21st century. So our programs are all at the master's level, the ones that I've just mentioned. You can do them in combinations. You can do double masters as well as single masters, and you can come into them as a 1.5-year program, but also as a 1-year program. And the reason why we do that is because we try to acknowledge in our structures that people who come out of industry, who've worked in these areas themselves, or perhaps are still working in them, should be able to do the master's degrees in a shorter period of time because they already have recognised knowledge. So you can come into the 1-year program either with undergraduate qualifications that focus purely on security studies or directly to security studies and with a high grade, or you can come into the 1-year program because you have significant professional experience or some other form of experience. The 1.5-year program is open to anyone. It's much more generally open. You don't have to have done a security studies undergraduate program to get into it. You can have done any degree basically, and we will consider your application. And we're very happy to allow people into those programs who have very different undergraduate backgrounds that aren't security studies focused in particular. We also have the graduate certificate, which is a shorter 1-semester program, or I should say half a year. It is really four courses, what we call units, over that 1 semester. And that's a really great entry point for someone who might be uncertain about going back to university, might be a long time since they did that undergraduate program, or in very exceptional cases, there might be someone who's working in the field at a very senior level, has a lot of experience, but doesn't necessarily have the university undergraduate background, but can perhaps come in at that postgraduate graduate certificate level and see how the program suits them and see how they perform, and then articulate from that up into a full master's. So really what we try and do is be as flexible as we can, as industry focused as we can, while still being highly academic in what we do and the research that we do, and the different sorts of programs that we offer. I'll just say a last couple of words about some of the things that make these programs distinct to my mind. I've spent a lot of time, amongst other programs around Australia, and also I get the opportunity to travel around the world a lot and visit other professionals and academics working in these areas. And some of the things that we do that are quite unique include the simulation program that we offer. Everyone who does these master's programs will finish at the end of the program with a unit that everyone does together, no matter what masters you might be part of. It could be counter-terrorism or intelligence or cybersecurity. And the cohorts come together and do a 13-week simulation. And that simulation is a case study, something like, India and Pakistan have started to mobilize over Kashmir. Let's see a series of steps that relate to international security, relate to terrorism, relate to cybersecurity, relate to intelligence, that we all might have to start moving through as that scenario unfolds. It's a great way to take academic skills that you may have learned during your course and apply them to the real world. It's a lot of fun, and it shows some of the real curveballs and complexity that the real world offers that academic departments often aren't able to properly replicate. We also have internship programs for our postgraduate students. We have a lot of really great partners in law enforcement, security, government, the private sector that we have relationships with, who have taken our students on internships before. You're going to meet one of our students in a moment who's done an internship himself. And we also have some really great international opportunities. We have exchange programs with security studies degrees in Europe. We have a study tour that you can do, if you like, as part of your program that takes you to Washington and to New York to visit members of the security establishment there. And we also have opportunities in the sort of closer to home in the Asia Pacific area. So look, we think it's a really great series of programs and a really great series of degrees. We all really enjoy doing this research, being involved in this area, teaching students and getting to know the new students as they come through. Quite often it's the postgraduate students who bring so much to our classes that they're actually offering so much experience themselves. Others come to the classes with no prior experience, and that's fine as well. They learn a lot in the classes and in the seminars that we run. But with that, I'll finish up and I'll pass it back over to Jacqueline, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your questions later on in the webinar. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Droogan. There were some very interesting things you mentioned, and I hope all that makes sense to you guys. But if you have any questions, as we've mentioned before, feel free to put those in the Q&A box and we're happy to answer those for you. So up now, I would like to introduce Chris to talk to us today about his experience with Macquarie and also in this amazing field.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Hey everyone, my name's Chris. I am a postgraduate alumni within the Department of Security Studies and Criminology at Macquarie University. Whilst completing my degree, I was also very fortunate enough to be employed as an academic tutor and marker within the department as well. I graduated at the end of 2019 and started a career within the Australian federal government. However, I was made redundant due to the global COVID-19 pandemic. But however, I was also fortunate enough to successfully apply for a security-focused role at a US tech company where I'm still currently working.
Amazing, thank you so much. So our first question today is, what was it that motivated you to work in roles related to security and law enforcement?
Yeah, great question, Jacqueline. I think as a kid, I loved playing chess. And the thing about chess is, in order to win, you need to be calculative in assessing risk, as well as use deception and psychological warfare in order to gain an advantage and eventually win against your opponent. And as I grew older, I realized that all these little quote unquote chess techniques fall under the broader umbrella of strategy. And once I grew out of chess, I took an interest in strategic warfare, international relations, and modern history. I started reading books like The Art of War by Sun Tzu and On War by Carl von Clausewitz. And I realized in many ways the same techniques used in a game of chess is replicated in the real world. And so in many ways, my greatest career ambition was to find a career that would incorporate my passion for strategy that was developed from a love of chess as a child, as well as a career that would allow me to help people within my community and or my country. I was very fortunate enough to come across Macquarie University's Department of Security Studies and Criminology, formerly known as the Centre for Policing, Intelligence and Counter-Terrorism, where I've completed both my undergraduate and postgraduate degrees.
Wow, amazing. I really like that analogy you use with chess. I've never actually heard that before, but just from my experience, at least at Macquarie, I can definitely see what you mean. I do think that's a really good way of describing it. So cool, thank you for introducing yourself. The second question we have, I really like this one because again, I haven't heard this one asked before, but it's Macquarie courses teach you specific skills relevant to security analysis, intelligence, and crime prevention. But what are some of the high-level soft skills that Macquarie teaches you in these degrees?
Great question, Jacqueline. I think perhaps two of the most important soft skills or people skills that I've learned during my time in Macquarie University is leadership and teamwork. In almost every arena, security is always a team sport. There's always a clear chain of command. You're always working with partnering agencies. And something that Macquarie University does really well is create team-based wargaming simulations. You know, something that Dr. Julian mentioned before. Most students within the postgraduate courses will eventually complete a simulation exercise. And during these simulations, you are forced to work with a variety of different people with different personalities. You learn the importance of maintaining good relations and with people while simultaneously developing effective methods of conflict resolution.
Yep. That sounds so interesting and very intense, but I really like the sound of that. And as an undergraduate student as well, we've had to do similar simulations, but I don't think they're to the same extent, obviously, as postgraduate. And that's one of the things that I'm most excited to do. So I really like that Macquarie does that. Our third question, How quickly is your sector evolving, and what sorts of skills and knowledge will be necessary to keep up with the pace of change in this sector?
So as a security professional, the international security industry is constantly changing and changing for the better. At first glance, most people would think that this degree would lead to a career within the public sector, either working in law enforcement, defense, or intelligence. And whilst this may be true years ago, the industry has since evolved, especially with the current booming demand of cybersecurity professionals. There is now a growing demand for security professionals in the private sector. Whether it's working in a bank, a consulting firm, or a tech company, there is a growing demand within the private sector for security professionals who can think critically, who can risk assess, and develop effective solutions to manage risks. And so probably the biggest skill is to keep on learning and to keep your mind fresh. Because as the world and technology evolve, the nature of such risks evolve alongside as well. And as a result, our duty as security professionals is to evolve alongside with the risks in order to keep up with them and eventually develop solutions to manage them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's a really good answer. And you sort of already touched on that on the next question in your response. But what is your general feeling regarding career prospects for people who are considering studying and working in security and intelligence?
Yeah, funny question that. Well, from my time as a tutor at Macquarie University, I always ask my students where they want to work after completing this degree. And funnily enough, about 85% of them say they want to work for a certain four-letter agency within the Australian federal government, the one that shall not be named.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst that's not impossible, I do believe that if you do have this mindset, your career prospects upon completing this degree will be very limited. However, I do believe that if you do come with an open mind and cast a wide net when it comes to job applications, the career prospects are indeed very high. Like I said before, the career prospects are not solely limited to the public sector.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've definitely learned as well, is that, as you both mentioned before, a lot of people assume that public sector is the only way that you can go, but there is private sector and then there's NGOs as well, which is something that Dr. Drewgen taught me previously. So there's definitely many different pathways. And I think, as you said before, Chris, limiting yourself to just the public sector, there's so many other things beyond that. So it's really good that we have degrees that do show you all different types of pathways that you can go into. And just from what I've heard, I know that the degrees Dr. Droogan mentioned before will definitely take you in all these different paths. So yeah, thank you for that response. Do you keep up with colleagues from your study, and what sorts of roles are they working in at the moment?
Yeah, I actually believe I've made lifelong friends during my time at university. I've studied alongside them. I've completed my degree alongside them. I've traveled overseas with a few of them, and I've also worked with them in a professional context as well. Most of them are working in the public sector, whether it's the federal or state government. Some of them are working in the private sector, and a couple are actually pursuing a career in academia and are currently completing further studies towards a PhD. Like I said before, the career prospects of this degree are not only very high, but also very diverse. And so if you ever get bored in one area, there's always an opportunity to jump to another sector.
Wonderful. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have to talk to Chris this evening, but thank you so much for coming along and talking to us today. It's been really insightful and we really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. Macquarie, my time studying here at Macquarie has been one of two of my best years of my life, and I'm very honored and privileged that you guys have invited me to come speak to you all. Thank you very much.
No worries. Have a good evening. Okay, up next, we do have the Q&A session with Dr. Droogan. If you've sent a question in already, that's wonderful. We'll endeavour to get to that question. But if there's anything that continues to pop up in your mind as we're talking through the different questions we've got at the moment, you still do have time to send those questions in, and we would love to hear from you. Okay, we have quite a few of them, so we'll get started. The first one, I'll just read it word for word because it's quite long and I want to make sure I get it right. It says, I am most excited by a career in an Australian intelligence agency with a transnational focus, for example, either DIO or ASIS. What should I study? Either the Master of Security and Strategic Studies or the Master of Intelligence?
That's a difficult question to ask because I don't recruit for either of those organisations or indeed for any organisation. So I can't give you any specific information on what you need to do to get into a government organisation. Certainly not one as restricted, I suppose, as the ones that you mentioned. However, I can tell you that graduates of ours, have and do, end up in those sorts of organisations sometimes. In terms of skills, though, doing an intelligence program, I think, is useful to understand how intelligence works. In particular, as I mentioned before, intelligence analysis. But I think you also should always be aware that these sorts of organisations recruit from other kinds of degrees as well. So you might want to think about doing something like one of our intelligence masters in combination perhaps with a master's from another discipline. Because many of the skills that you'll be employed for in those organisations or in many other organisations are going to be the sorts of skills that you might learn in all sorts of different degrees. It might be, how do you deal with vast amounts of data in a way that allows you to make sense of them, to find patterns, and to critically analyse that data so that you can see things that other people might not see. And so, for instance, those sorts of skills, I know people that get them from history degrees, studying history or something like that. It's quite remarkable. Languages are very useful as well, of course, if you want to work in any sort of international environment. And many of the other sort of soft skills that you might have around, maturity and critical thinking and being able to, talk to people and, be charismatic and so on. So there are many different factors at play getting these sorts of very, very restricted kinds of roles. And I think you have to obviously, work very hard to distinguish yourself from other graduates. And I'd strongly recommend, our intelligence degree, I think would be a good one in that regard. But don't forget, as I said before, other degrees can be just as useful as well in combination.
Very good answer. I love it. Okay, our second question is, what national security intelligence jobs are there in Melbourne, or does pursuing that career require a move to Canberra?
Oh, not at all. I mean, everyone seems to want to work for national security, no matter what Chris just said, which was very true. No, generally, if you want to enter into national security, it will be a federal job. Generally, not always. Generally, you would enter it through a graduate program, and that would usually entail you going to Canberra for a period of time. However, I do know many people that have moved in to national security careers through beginning at a state level. So it's not impossible to get an entry-level position in a government department that is state-based in Victoria or any of the states or territories in Australia. And then once you are in the system, so to speak, to be able to move sideways and diagonally and so on within that network of different government departments and agencies and services and so on, based on your capacities and your skills. So, many people will aim, straight for Canberra and for the graduate entry program. It's a great thing to do if you think you've got what it takes to enter, one of those areas, DFAT or something. However, don't forget, you can also go for state-based departments, even ones that you might not think about, and then move sideways and in parallel and so on, as your career progresses. I often notice that students, really want to get straight to that dream job, and some people might be lucky enough to be picked up into one of those dream jobs if that's what they dream. But what I've noticed is that most people's careers are a work in progress, and there are lots of steps. And as Chris said before, you never know where you're going to end up. People might want to go into national security and then find out they're far more interested working for, Red Cross International or something like that. Or they might want to go into national security and then decide the private sector is better for them. This happens all the time.
Just going off your response there, so for those everyone listening who might be interested in the state level jobs, when you talk about an entry level position at a state level, what is the sort of work that you might be doing in that position?
It depends entirely on what the organisation is, but I can give you examples. I mean, this might sound a little bit humdrum, but I know graduates that have done intelligence and they've wanted to work in an analyst role, and they end up getting a job for the New South Wales, Department of, something like roads and transports or something like that. And in that sort of a role, it might be more of a criminology focus or something like that. Looking at a lot of data around driver registrations or whatever it might be. Looking for patterns, trying to understand processes, trying to investigate issues that might be emerging or occurring. It's basically if you're working in an analyst role, which I assume is what the question is aimed towards, then it will generally be looking for patterns in data. And collecting information for briefings and for case studies and so on. That's generally how it works. But of course, every role will be different, every department will be different, and so on. The skills that we try to teach are the ones that are going to let you understand, what those roles entail, why those roles exist, what those roles are designed to do, and give you the sorts of general skills that you need to do them well, such as risk analysis, such as being able to do critical analysis, being able to apply methods and systems to large amounts of data to try and find patterns and so on, to be aware of your own expectations and biases, to understand there's a cycle approach when you're trying to analyze data. I mean, there are many issues there that are general, but the specifics of what you do might be quite unique to that role.
Yeah, I like that it's very adaptable. As you were mentioning before when you were discussing our courses, you can definitely tell that they do try and teach you the general skills, but they're all very transferable. So I think it's good that we have the different categories of degrees, but ultimately they're all going to be beneficial to a multitude of different organizations. So
that's right, Jacqueline. The reality is, and I think we have to speak realities here, is that a university degree is essential in many regards to getting these sorts of jobs. But once you get the role, many employers in these sorts of fields will want to retrain you once you get there. We might teach you general skills, and we do, and we might teach you some very specific skills as well, so you really understand how to do these sorts of things. But when you go into that job, the people who employ you are going to want you to do things their way. And so, you always have to be, I think, willing to be a lifelong learner, and to take the ability to learn, the ability to adapt and to adjust and to contextualize what you know, that we teach you, and then take that to the workplace and be prepared to change more, to keep on learning, to keep on changing.
I think it's exciting. I like the thought of having your job consistently change and adapt to new situations. I find that that's one of the things I really enjoy about this industry, just from my experience, is that it's definitely a lot of flexibility. So yeah, I think that was a really good response to that question. I hope whoever asked that feels satisfied in that response and they have a bit more of an idea about, which degree is best for them and what national security jobs they can do at both a federal and state level. Okay, our next question was, the Australian intelligence community has seen a lot of growth over recent years. What are the job prospects in the AIC going to be like looking forward?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I can pretty much assure you that they're good. One of the challenges, one of the dynamics in security studies is that we are counter-trend in some ways. When geopolitical issues or domestic issues go south and things, feel insecure, people want to understand security and to do security studies and to work in these fields. And there's demand from all these sectors for people who know how to operate in an increasingly, I hate to say it, insecure global environment that we live in. So I can't tell you, what the future will bring, but I see no reason why the Australian intelligence community won't continue to grow, and grow right across these different sectors, federal, state, and right through the private sector and so on as well. And that's, I think that's the trend that we've seen for some years, and it will continue going forward.
Yeah. And this next question might be a little bit more challenging to answer because we're still figuring out online and in-person courses at Macquarie, but will the courses that you mentioned before be guaranteed as a fully online course for 2021?
Actually, that's an easy question to ask, because our department has not really been hit by COVID-19 as badly as some other universities might, because we've actually had an online option for our programs for almost a decade now. We were very much early adapters when it comes to being able to deliver programs online. And that's partly because we have a lot of people who do our programs that are already working in these industries, and they do these sorts of postgraduate degrees to enhance their careers, enhance their knowledge, their learning, and also for professional development and promotion and so on as well. So they are often working during the day. They don't have a lot of free time. Most students today are also working. You know, life is very busy. There's a lot of expectations. So we offer all of our programs online for those who need to do it online, and also in class. So we try to be as flexible as we can be to accommodate both of those needs. Sometimes people compare, you know, what's better, online or offline. I don't think it's a matter of which one's better. I think they both serve different purposes. I think if you can do the classes on campus and come and meet people and sit in those seminars and meet myself, the other lecturers, and build up those social relationships, that's a really great way to go. You can network in our seminars as well. I mean, there are a lot of really interesting people, not just from Australia, but students from right around the world working in all of these areas who are doing our programs, who have access to meet. But if you are going to do them online, then that's a really great affordance too. It means that you have flexibility. You know, we have an integrated online learning system called iLearn. In that, you can get all of the materials that you need for your course, your readings, your assessments, your audio-visual materials, your links, and so on. You can stream all the lectures and so on. You can submit everything online as well. And that's really flexible and useful for people who are you know, in complex jobs. We've even had people who are on deployment in various parts of the world be able to do our programs online as well. So yeah, you can do them on campus, you can do them online. The last thing to say on that, which is if you do them on campus, we actually also hold our seminars after 5 p.m. So either 5 through till 7 p.m. or 7 through till 9 p.m. And again, that reason is for even the people who want to do it on campus, they also often work during the day and so on. So we, again, try to be as responsive as we can be to the pressures of the industry.
Definitely many options for those of you considering these courses. I really like that they're very flexible with when we offer different sessions. Okay, our next question. I really like this one because this is something that I used to worry about early on in my degree, because a lot of people didn't talk about it until I got into third year. So good question for whoever asked this one. How technically minded does a contemporary intelligence analyst need to be? And so this particular person is very interested in the technology, cybersecurity side. I guess the root of their question is, how much of that do you need to know to be able to succeed in an intelligence role?
Yeah, well, it depends on the role. And the more technical skills you have, you know, the better. It goes with most skills, I think, in life. But I don't think you need to feel intimidated if you don't have those technical skills, because, again, cybersecurity is one of those areas where our graduates, both undergraduate and postgraduate, have been getting a lot of jobs right across these different sectors we've been talking about. You know, I've met graduates of ours who are working for Qantas, who are working for the banks, who are working for the big tech giants and so on in cybersecurity. And they are not programmers. You know, they're not coders. They're not there programming fixes to cybersecurity problems, but they're there being able to strategically think about and work through cybersecurity problems within a context of all the other security issues that interplay. And today, what we're seeing is cybersecurity is almost like an umbrella. Almost any of the issues that we talk about in our programs, terrorism, intelligence, state versus state conflict, crime, you know, they all have a cybersecurity element today. You can't escape the cyber element. And so to be able to think strategically about what that means, that interface between human beings and technology, and what are the social and technological implications for that when it comes to crime and security, they're the real skills the industry are looking for at the moment. And, you know, I'm really happy to say that our students are getting jobs, you know, in the industry, which is fantastic. In fact, one of our students I saw yesterday has just been nominated for the Young Cybersecurity Professional Prize, National Prize, I think just yesterday, which is
amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive. Look what you can get if you come to Macquarie and do a degree with us. Alrighty, our next question here is this particular person is a bit confused about the practical differences between the Counter-Terrorism Masters and the Intelligence Masters. Would you be able to explain, when you're actually studying the degree, what the main differences are and the typical jobs that come from both of those?
Yeah, well, these questions are getting tougher and tougher as we go on, aren't they?
Very specific, yeah.
It's a good one. It's a good question. So first of all, I should say that the degrees are separate. However, you will have the opportunity to do courses from both in the degree. So even if you come in at a one-year master's, which means that you do 8 courses, we call them units, 4 of those units will be core units that are specific to your issue, you know, your degree. So intelligence-focused units, say if you're doing the intelligence masters. Another 2 units would be units that you have to do that ground you and orient you in security studies in general. But then you would still have an option of 2 other units that you can then choose from across our program. So you might want to take those units in cybersecurity or in terrorism studies or the internship I mentioned before, you know, and so on and so forth. So there will be some blending in what you do in the programs, which is really good because all of these issues are networked, you know, and they do relate to one another. In terms of what you'll actually be doing, well, you know, in terrorism studies, the 4 units that you would do would really give you a very thorough understanding of terrorism, of what terrorism is, why it exists, how it works as a strategy, how it works as a tactic, its relationship to broader concepts like violent extremism, civil disobedience, dissent, and so on. You would look at countering terrorism, social programs to counter terrorism, hard programs to counter terrorism, law enforcement, criminal investigations, international terrorism trends. You would really get a thorough understanding of terrorism in all of its dimensions, as a social issue, as a security issue, as a national security issue, as an international issue as well. If you did our intelligence program, the units you would do would really help you understand how intelligence operates as a skill in industry. You know, the history of intelligence, where it comes from, different ways that intelligence analysts and operatives work. You know, what is the cycle of information intelligence? How do you source information? Once you've got information, how do you process information? How do you analyze information? What do you do with it then? You know, how do you act on it effectively, which is often, you know, the real failing in intelligence cycles, you know, action at the end. You learn about great intelligence failures of the past, intelligence successes, and really just how to operate in that domain of information, gathering information, whether it's secret or not, and then dealing with that information, analyzing it one way or another. So very different degrees, but also quite complementary as well.
Yeah, definitely very complementary. And you mentioned before earlier in that response about internships. We do have someone who's a bit concerned about whether or not we offer internships Australia-wide or if they're just in New South Wales, because some potential applicants, of course, won't be based in New South Wales. So yeah, could you take us through the types of internships that we have?
Absolutely. So what we don't have is we don't have a series of, you know, internships in X, Y, and Z that we offer every year, like a placement. What we do instead is we have relationships with all sorts of different organizations, government, private sector, and NGOs as well. And we often have people from those organizations will come and give guest lectures with us, or be involved in our units and programs in one way or another. But they will also have a understanding that, you know, if the right candidate comes along, they can also take them as an intern. Now, we also allow our students to source internships and pitch us with ideas for who they might want to work with. And so we've had many examples of students working in Queensland, in Victoria, in Tasmania, on internships. We're not able at the moment to do international internships because of insurance issues, but you can do sort of practice-based international opportunities in other ways at the university. So in terms of where people go, well, we've had people work for the big consultancy firms like KPMG and so on in their internships. We've had people work for some of the big airlines in internships. We've had people work for some of the crime commissions, state-based crime commissions across Australia. We've had people work in police intelligence at various levels in various states. So VicPol, New South Wales Pol, and so on in terms of their internships. We've had people work for organisations like corrections as well is another example. We've had people work for, so many different organisations. And so one of the things that we would like to do with our students is once you're part of our community and our programs, we're very happy to talk with you about internship opportunities, find out a bit about what you're interested in, what sort of skills you have, where you might want to end up, and to work with you to try and find the right partner for you in terms of an internship.
Cool. Thank you for that response. Our next question is from someone who wants to know a bit about the types of students who do these courses and whether or not they are fresh out of undergraduate studies or if more of them are professionals looking to either change or advance their career.
Yeah, it's a split. It really is a split. I don't know if it's exactly 50-50 or not, but it feels like it. We have students, as I said before, who are, working in all of these domains. And many of them are from overseas, and they come to Australia on scholarships that are offered by the Australian government to build relationships with our partners around the Asia Pacific and beyond. And they might come from a policing organisation or a government department or defence in an ASEAN country or in South Asia or the Middle East or in Europe or North America. And so we have a very large international community of practitioners who do our programs with us. We also have a large number, and it's just incredible, I should say, what you can learn from international practitioners on issues like any of these issues. It's an incredible learning experience. We also have lots of Australians who are working in these communities as well. Often, not always, but often they'll be doing the degrees online, but that might be because they're in Canberra or they're somewhere else. Or because their work is very demanding. But many of them will also come to class. And when I give classes, say I'm running a seminar, I generally notice that it's about 50-50. About 50% of the people will have that professional expertise and they're looking to upskill or to move within their industry. And the other sort of 50% will be people who are out of university and they're still looking for that entry level and they're trying to find their way. And so it's an interesting dynamic. And I should say that the two halves actually help each other out somewhat as well. People who are looking for an entry can really be guided by people who are already there and know what they're doing. People who are already there and have sort of got a foot in these sort of industries, are sort of going back to uni anyway. And for them, it's quite nice to be in that learning environment with people, who are at different levels than they are. So it's a very dynamic and diverse sort of environment for our students and for us.
Yeah, good mix of both.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This next question is a good question, actually, because we were talking about the simulations before. This question is, does studying online affect participating in the simulations and teamwork activities?
It doesn't affect them in the sense that you get the same opportunity. So we have to, according to university policy, provide an equal level of opportunity for people online as opposed to offline. And the courses are the same. So if you're doing, for instance, an online degree or an online program, you'll be in the same class as the students who are doing on campus. It's not like you're separate or anything. You're still on the same online learning platform. You're still also part of the same cohort. We have some students who come to class, but then they can't come to class for a few weeks because they're on deployment or they have to go somewhere for work, and they do it online for a few weeks and they come back and do it on class. We can arrange all of that. But obviously, it's challenging for us to create opportunities like the simulation that can be done online. But we have done it. And so, our online students do it remotely, and our in-class students do it in class. And there are so many platforms and technologies, as you know, today to be able to blend all that together.
Cool. All right, thank you for that response. We do have a question from someone who's interested in the forensic side of cybersecurity. And we're wondering, from that slide that you had up before when you were doing your presentation, which of the degrees would be best for someone who's interested in that very particular area?
Of cybersecurity?
Of forensics side of cybersecurity.
Well, absolutely the cybersecurity program. And I should say that, as I said before, our cybersecurity program is part of a larger cybersecurity capacity that Macquarie University has, both in terms of the work we do with government and industry in actually doing cybersecurity. As I mentioned, we've had a lot of international opportunities to work in that area. In terms of the programs that we offer, the one that we offer is very strategic, but our science department, or faculty I should say, offers a cybersecurity master's, which is connected to ours in some of the units are shared, that is very much based on programming and based on computing skills. So when you come to us and do cybersecurity, again, you can have a blended experience. You can do some strategic focused cybersecurity courses. You can also take some units from the more technical computing side of things, or not, depending on how you'd like to create that particular program. So have a look at our cybersecurity programs online and have a look at our cybersecurity analysis and also have a look at how that's networked into a larger suite of cybersecurity programs at Macquarie University.
Yeah, that's some good advice. I completely agree. And we do have time for just one more question, and it's a pretty broad question, so we'll see if you can answer it in a few minutes. But it's, what differentiates Macquarie from other universities around Australia?
Well, in terms of security studies, that's an easy question to answer. There are a lot of universities in Australia around the world have international relations and politics departments. You know, I don't want to sort of diminish them at all, but what they will tend to focus on is the international relations of states, countries, and how politics works. And these are departments and disciplines that have existed for decades, if not a century. What very few universities in Australia offer is security studies. So if you go to, say, these other universities of international relations or politics, they might have a security course as part of that. There might be a unit called international security, where you look at these really complex, networked, difficult to address security challenges that we all face. Climate change, for instance, that's an issue that we all face. It's going to be a security issue for all of our lifetimes and beyond. How do you address that from an international relations perspective? Well, you need a broader perspective to deal with something like climate change. Same, I would argue, with terrorism and everything else that we do. So how we are different is that we have a separate international relations department here at Macquarie University. We have politics, and they're great departments that give great programs, but we are separate to them. We're international security studies, and we are a whole department that is focused on international security studies. We have 20 or more staff members. We have these 5 different programs. We have the whole undergraduate program. We have PhD programs, and all of it is in security studies. So we really try to focus on that multidisciplinary nature of security studies. You really have to be able to draw from different disciplines to address these problems in a holistic and a dynamic way. And we really focus as well on that intersection between theory and practice and impact in the real world. So we're very different like that. And so if you look at other universities in Australia that actually have security studies programs like ours, you could list them on one hand. I'm not going to go through each of them and tell you why we're better than them. But we are the biggest and we are the most comprehensive in Australia. And I would argue that we're also one of the longest standing, and I think we have the most experience as well. So I think if you really want to understand international security in its own terms and really have a multidisciplinary approach to it, and really have that connection with industry that we have and domestic and global opportunities, I would say Macquarie University is well above the other options that you have in Australia. Absolutely.
That was a very strong last response. I love that. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, but I'd like to remind you all that this session has been recorded. So if there was anything that we covered that you wanted to go back and recap, you will have a copy of this available to you. We'll also endeavour to respond to any questions that you have that we didn't get through today by email. So don't worry if you didn't have your question answered. Additionally, if you do have any further questions, as you can see on the screen, you can book a one-on-one personal consultation with us by clicking on that link. And I would highly encourage that if you are someone who does have quite a few different questions and would like personalized responses and advice for you. So that is a really good resource that you have. And lastly, thank you so much to both Julian and Chris for sharing your careers and your insights and your advice with us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a really good evening and we'll speak to you soon.